Hey everyone, Chad here again with the Pulse One Tech Talk. I've got my friend Ryan Jamieson with Net Security. He's the principal consultant. Pulse One and Net Security have partnered together for years with mutual clients. So welcome, Ryan. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you put together the top four recommendations from Ryan from Net Security, and we wanted to share them with the world. And yeah, go for it.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I mean, you and I have been working together for quite some time. And, you know, through all the different clients that we've seen, there's always a consistent theme when people need to start kind of bootstrapping their security. And so I want to talk a little bit with you about the four things that I think pretty much everybody on Earth, if you're on the internet, which is an inherently safe place, you should be doing these four things. So
And so
from the top.
they're not for just a business. They're for anybody, any business, best
Yes.
practices.
People in general. Now, businesses are made of people, right? So they need to be doing these things too. And certainly there's a lot more things that they should be focusing on. But just your average person on the street that's going to be working, on the internet, using their computer on a regular basis. These are things that they need to be aware of. And these are things that business owners need to be communicating out to their employees. Like these are table stakes, things that we should be all operating on the internet with.
So your first one is be skeptical.
That's right.
So tell me more about
Definitely
that.
skepticism, right? It costs nothing. All it costs is you having the courage as an individual to stop for a second and think, does this make sense? One of the most common threats that we see out there in the world right now is called business email compromise. What it is old school fraud, old school scams being run via email. Now, sometimes there's some account takeovers that happen as part of this, but a lot of the time, what we're seeing is individuals who are being enticed or coerced to take actions immediately. Oftentimes, what we'll see is emails that look like they are from a CFO saying, I need you to do this thing right now, really quickly. It could be wiring money, it could be buying Apple gift cards, it could be a host of different things. It could be your chief executive officer. It could be somebody senior in your organization that is looking for you to execute immediately on the task at hand. In the real world, they're not that common. Most of the time, your CFO isn't going to reach out to you to tell you that you need to go and do this right now. Having a little skepticism helps slow the process down, slows the attack down. And as long as we can slow these attacks down, it makes everybody safer because these attackers work on speed. And if we take that away from them, then we're more likely to better defend ourselves. So when we're saying be skeptical, think twice about like, who is that email from? When you get a call and the caller ID says Department of Justice or the IRS or the local sheriff's department, it's really easy to spoof these numbers these days. Just because your caller ID says it's this thing, and the person on the other end of the line says that they've got a warrant or there's all these fines coming, be skeptical. Say, okay, great, I'll call you right back. And just call the actual desk number for these places. Call your sheriff's department. Call the line for the IRS. They'll be more than happy to tell you that the person that you just hung up on is a scammer.
Yeah,
That's how these things work. So,
yeah.
first and foremost, be skeptical about the world, be skeptical about the information that you're getting. Take a second, verify the source, verify where it's coming from before you take any actions. Your CFO is not going to be upset at you if you forward him an email or you verify these things and say, is this you? Because any CFO worth their salt these days has seen these sorts of things happen and is probably going to thank you for going, taking 30 seconds out of his day to verify that it's not good to wire thousands of dollars to some foreign account.
Sure. Okay, so number two, enable multi-factor authentication for everything. How do you do it for
Yes.
everything?
So multi-factor authentication, for those of you that don't know it, right? There are three factors for authentication. It's something that you know, which is a password, something that you have, which would be maybe a phone or maybe like a YubiKey or a password hardware token. And then it's something that you are, like your retina or your biometrics, like your fingerprints or something like that. So when we talk about multi-factor authentication, we're talking about you need to have more than just one. We've used passwords for a long time. Passwords were an imperfect solution to a common problem that was developed a long time ago. And so now what we need to do as we level up our security is improve upon these things. And multi-factor authentication is not a new thing. Back in Prohibition, you had multi-factor authentication if you wanted to get into a speakeasy. You had to A, know where it was, B, be prepped or have somebody in there know who your face was because like, hey, is this guy legit? And you had to know the password. So like there are these things. These are just modern takes on this solution. So when we talk about multi-factor authentication or MFA, what we want to do is make sure that it's enabled on all of the things that actually matter. So we're talking about our email accounts. We're talking about our bank accounts. We're talking about, logging in a business, logging into cloud services, logging into, your accounting systems. So MFA is wildly important. Now, when we talk about MFA, there's a lot of ways to do it. There's some good ways and there's some bad ways. All of the ways, even the good and the bad, are better than not doing it at all. So you may hear people say that SMS MFA is not great. And that's true. It's not the best. But you know what it's better than? Having none and just using a password. So if you can use MS or SMS MFA, you should do so. Better yet would be to use an app like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator for a one-time password. That's going to start moving you in the right direction. What I really want to convey is that everybody should be using it for everything they've got.
So the next one is number three is use a password manager or single sign-on. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So when I say use a password manager, when we were talking about MFA, I said passwords were imperfect. And I say passwords are imperfect because we have to remember them. Human beings are creating these things, and that makes them guessable. And it's not just human beings that are guessing passwords. Like a lot of people think, oh, well, I've got this password. No other human being is going to guess it. It doesn't work that way. When we're looking at how people break into passwords, it's not just some guy at a keyboard that is entering in passwords one by one. We're talking about people that are using specialized software on commodity hardware, things like the video card that sits in your kid's gaming computer, like to use that to guess billions of different passwords per second. And so when we're looking at passwords, like I can think of some clever passwords, but I can't think of a clever password that's going to withstand billions of guesses per second. It's just a matter of time before somebody gets into that. So when we think about a password manager, what we want to be able to do is we can't get away from passwords here, but what we can do is make them as difficult to crack as possible. And so when we do that, we want to make them long and a totally random string like FJ76 pound exclamation point capital Q and on and on. Now, these passwords are great because they're hard to crack, but they're also impossible to remember. This is the problem. So what a password manager does, it allows you to use your computer to create really hard to crack passwords, which is what we want, but not have to remember them. Think of it as like an old address book, some sort of like thing, your little black book that you keep in your back pocket. It's got all of the things that you need in there. And they're all these long random strings. And these things is this password vault is unlocked with one password that you know, which now you don't have to remember 25 random long strings. You just have to remember one password that is generally pretty good. So that makes your life a lot easier and it improves your online security significantly because it means that not only are your passwords really hard to guess, but also they're all different for all of the sites that you use. So if site A gets broken into and they steal all the passwords and manage to crack them, it doesn't matter because when they try to use that password on another site that you're on, it doesn't work. It's something new. So password managers are definitely worth it. Now, I will say that there's a bit of a lift at the beginning because you're going to have to go and change all your passwords for all your sites. And there's no two ways around that. It's kind of annoying. But it is something that you can do on the couch while you're binge watching whatever it is on Netflix lately. It doesn't take a whole lot of mental effort. You just got to log into things, use the password manager, change your password, log out, and off you go. What's great about it is the onboarding piece is made easier because a lot of them integrate with your browser's password manager.
Right.
Those password managers are not great. Do they work? Yes. But you have to remember, like Google Chrome is what most people are using. Google's main business is selling information to other entities. They're an ad company. I would rather use a password manager that is run by a company that is committed to keeping secrets rather than one that is committed to sharing information widely and broadly. So a lot of these password managers allow you to import your password lists from your browsers, which makes the life a little bit easier. They also offer a feature that allows you to know when sites have been compromised. So if some site has been popped and your password has been leaked or something like that, you'll know about it and we'll know immediately to go and change your password on that page.
All right. So number four, auto update everything and don't forget your routers.
That is correct. Now, I remember, I'm old enough to remember back in the day when I had to do manual updates for everything, and it was a long and arduous process. This is nobody's idea of a good time, but updates are necessary. Thankfully, now for most of us, we can just automatically set our computers to update themselves. And so, if you're on a Mac or if you're on a Windows PC, you can just set it through the settings to just say update as soon as possible, and it'll do that. Within the Windows environment, you can have it not just update your Windows OS, but also all of your Microsoft apps. So that's great. You should always do that. Chrome now tells you, hey, you should update because this version is out of date. Do that. But there are lots of other applications that you need to make sure that you're updating on a regular basis. If you've downloaded things from the Apple Store, then you need to go in and manually set those updates and go through and make sure that those are doing, updates on their own. If you install new applications that you're using on a regular basis, make sure that you have set those up to make sure that they're looking for that.
One statistic that we heard, or I heard a long time ago, was 70% of all breaches happen through either email or outdated operating system slash software. So literally, if you have you have a good email filtering solution that protects you from phishing and spear phishing, and then also you just update everything like you're talking about, you 70% of breaches go away just by those two best practices. So yeah.
Yeah, those are the table stakes, and that's what we got to be doing. But it's amazing. Just because we know that's what we should be doing doesn't necessarily mean that is what we are doing. If you looked at my gym membership, I've had the same amount of credits on my gym card as I had last month, and maybe the month before that. So I know I need to be doing it. It's just that I haven't quite been doing it as often as I need to. And that's what a lot of these software things are, and a lot of security things are. It's up there with hygiene. You just have to get yourself in the habit of doing these things and putting your mind in that sense of like, this is important. But I did want to pause and hit on the router piece, right? Because that's the one thing that people always end up forgetting. They get the internet working and then it's just fire and forget. And the router is your gateway to the internet. We need to be logging into these devices on at least a monthly basis to check for updates. And this can be an annoying process, but go to your corner of your house or into the cupboard or wherever you may have stashed your wireless router or what have you, and go look for the label on that thing. And then Google, how do I update that device? It's super important to do these. And if you're running a device that works but no longer has any more security updates because it's end of life, I hate to break it to you, but it's time to go get a new device because if it's no longer supported, that means that any bugs that are discovered are going to be weaponized and used against you.
My last question would be to you is like, why does it benefit a company to have a NIT security and a Pulse One? Like, what's the difference? Why don't I just get NIT security, Ryan, and I'm good?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what I would say is, like anything else in life, we want the best tool for the job. And so when we're talking about managing your IT infrastructure versus providing security over your IT infrastructure, those are two different specialized tasks. And while security people know a lot about technology because we have to secure it, that doesn't necessarily make us experts in the operation of that on a day-to-day basis. Conversely, IT people are great at making sure that things work. You're going to get great uptime working with an MSP. However, their focus is on uptime and not on security necessarily. And so putting those two forces together allows you to both protect yourself and maintain uptime for all of the things that keep your businesses going. Security people are great at being paranoid. We're not going to give you the greatest user experience known to man. That's just not where our mind is. But what we are focusing on is how are criminals innovating? How did that most recent big breach happen? How did new malware that's been developed in, Eastern Europe or in China, how is that going to percolate and affect businesses across the board, right? And we have to go and do a lot of digging about what is the impact? Like, what are we going to do to be able to protect businesses from these sort of novel attacks and new things beyond just being skeptical, using MFA, having a password manager, and updating all your stuff. Staying aware of all of those things to protect businesses has unfortunately become a full-time job. And so focusing on those things is what we do here at NIT. And that's why we like to be able to partner with MSPs who are definitely focused on making sure that everything runs smoothly while we're over here being paranoid.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for a few minutes of your time. I appreciate it, and looking forward to continue to working with you.
Likewise, thanks for the time.